In the heart of Obodoani, a land of rolling green hills, vast rivers and great traditions, there lived two sisters, Olaedo and Nwanyịocha. Their mother, Mama Ijeoma, often said, "A pot is known by the fire that shapes it," but the two sisters had been shaped by different fires. Olaedo, the younger sister, was strikingly beautiful. Her skin gleamed like the golden sands of the river Amenze, and her hair was thick as the dark forest of Ogbunike. However, beneath her beauty lay a heart untouched by labor. She despised work, shunned responsibility, and cared only for her appearance. Nwanyịocha, on the other hand, was not as breathtaking, but she possessed the beauty of the soul. Her hands were skilled in weaving, cooking, and tending to the home. She was the pride of the village women who often said, "A woman who knows the way of the heart is a blessing to her household." One evening, under the dim glow of fireflies, Mama Ijeoma sighed as she watched Olaedo admire her reflection in a calabash of water. "Olaedo, my daughter, beauty alone cannot cook a meal or build a home." Olaedo scoffed, "But beauty can get me a man who will provide all those things," she replied, twisting her waist in front of an imaginary audience. Nwanyịocha, stirring a pot of yam porridge over the fire, only shook her head. She had long given up trying to change her sister. Mama Ijeoma clasped her hands. "I fear the day will come when the wind of fate will scatter you like dry leaves." Olaedo laughed. "Mama, do not fear for me. I was born for greatness, not for a life of kneading fufu or fetching water." The winds of fate, however, were already stirring. Word spread through Obodoani like harmattan wind. Obiọra, the wealthiest man from the neighboring kingdom of Umuoji, was searching for a wife. Obiọra was not just any man. He was a merchant whose caravans stretched across the lands, carrying goods from the gold mines of the north to the salt plains of the south. His wealth was spoken of in hushed admiration. He owns 100 cows and 50 goats. He built his mother's house with red camwood and ebony wood. He wears silk from distant lands. The women of Obodoani buzzed with excitement, and mothers prepared their daughters, oiling their skins with palm kernel oil and braiding their hair with coral beads. But none prepared more than Olaedo. "Obiọra is mine," she whispered as she ground camwood into a fine powder for her skin. "A man of such wealth needs a woman of my beauty, not a woman who smells of firewood and palm oil." Nwanyịocha, who sat beside her pounding yam for the evening meal, said nothing. The next Eke market day, Obiọra arrived in Obodoani with his entourage. His skin glistened like polished ebony, and his garments were embroidered with gold. He walked with the confidence of a lion, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "My heart seeks a woman who will bring warmth to my home and light to my soul," he declared at the village square. Olaedo stepped forward, swaying gracefully, her beauty undeniable. The sun seemed to embrace her skin, and the beads on her waist jingled softly. Obiọra's eyes lingered on her, then his gaze shifted to Nwanyịocha, who was modestly dressed, standing behind the crowd, carrying a basket of plantains. The air tensed. "You," Obiọra said, pointing to Nwanyịocha. Gasps erupted. Olaedo's heart stopped. The elders murmured, waiting for Obiọra's next words. "You are the one I choose." A stunned silence followed. Olaedo forced a smile and stepped forward. "Great Obiọra, surely you meant to say me," she said sweetly. "This is my elder sister, Nwanyịocha. She is hardworking, yes, but I'm the jewel of this land." Obiọra chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Beauty may catch the eye, but character captures the heart." Olaedo's lips trembled, but before she could protest further, Mama Ijeoma stepped forward. "It is a great honor," she said. "Nwanyịocha will make you a good wife." Olaedo's mind raced. She had dreamt of wealth, of luxury, of never lifting a finger for the rest of her life. This was her future. Then a thought struck her. If I lose him now, I lose everything, she murmured under her breath. And so, with a brilliant smile, she stepped forward and said, "Great Obiọra, my sister is shy and modest, but she cannot bear to leave home without me. Let me come with her and help her settle into your household." Obiọra raised an eyebrow, but before he could refuse, Nwanyịocha placed a gentle hand on his arm. "If my sister wishes to come, let her," she said softly. And so, that was how both sisters left Obodo, one as a wife, the other with a plan. Olaedo had lost the first battle, but she was determined to win the war. The journey to Umuoji was long, passing through thick forests and winding rivers. Nwanyịocha, with her calm spirit, admired the beauty of the land, while Olaedo sat silently, her mind plotting. As they entered Obiọra's grand compound, Olaedo gasped. The estate was larger than she had imagined. Mud walls decorated with intricate carvings, a courtyard lined with palm trees, and servants dressed in fine clothing, moving about swiftly. This should have been mine, she thought bitterly. Obiọra led Nwanyịocha to her new home, a beautifully decorated hut with fine woven mats, clay pots, and a bed carved from the strongest Iroko wood. He turned to her and smiled. "I hope you find happiness here," he said warmly. Nwanyịocha, though overwhelmed, nodded. "I will serve you well, my husband." Olaedo, standing in the background, smirked. Serve? That word was not in her vocabulary. That evening, as the servants prepared a great feast, Olaedo sat by Nwanyịocha's side, her voice sweet as honey. "Sister," she said softly, "this life is new to you. Managing a household, pleasing a man. It can be overwhelming. Let me help you." Nwanyịocha looked at her curiously. "Help me?" "Yes," Olaedo said, her eyes gleaming. "I will take charge of the house, so you can focus on your new life. Cooking, cleaning, handling the servants. These things require skill. Why burden yourself?" Nwanyịocha hesitated. She had never been one to shy away from work, but she trusted her sister. "If you insist," she said with a gentle smile. Olaedo grinned. "Leave everything to me." And so, from that day, Olaedo took control of the household, but instead of managing it, she treated it as her personal palace. She ordered the servants around, refusing to lift a finger. She adorned herself with Obiọra's finest gold, bathed in oils from the east, and spent hours before a mirror carved from the sacred Udala tree. Nwanyịocha, on the other hand, spent her days weaving, learning the ways of Umuoji, and growing closer to Obiọra. Obiọra at first paid no attention to Olaedo's laziness, but as days turned to weeks, he noticed how she would recline in the shade, fanning herself, while Nwanyịocha walked beside the other women, grinding millet and tending the fire. One evening, as the moon hung high, Obiọra approached his wife. "My love, why does your sister not help with the household?" Nwanyịocha frowned. "She is helping. At least I thought she was." But as she spoke, she noticed the servants whispering, stealing glances at Olaedo, who was seated in the courtyard, laughing as she sipped palm wine. Doubt crept into Nwanyịocha's heart. Had she been deceived? That night, she decided to watch her sister closely, and what she discovered would shake the very foundation of her trust. The next morning, Nwanyịocha rose before the sun, determined to observe her sister. She watched from the shadows as the servants prepared the morning meal. Olaedo was nowhere to be seen. "Where is the second mistress?" Nwanyịocha asked one of the servants. The young girl hesitated before whispering, "She is still sleeping, my lady. She does not wake before the third cock crow." Nwanyịocha frowned. She had always assumed Olaedo handled matters in the household, but now it was clear her sister did nothing. As the day went on, Nwanyịocha watched how the servants scurried under Olaedo's orders. Bring me fresh groundnut paste. Make my bath water warm but not too hot. Fetch me the finest silk from Obiora's store. Nwanyịocha's stomach turned. She had been blindly trusting, but now she saw the truth. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, she studied Obiọra. She noticed how his eyes lingered on her as she served him a bowl of fufu and egusi soup. It was not the gaze of a man admiring a wife's duty. No, there was something more in his eyes. Curiosity, interest, perhaps even admiration. As she turned to leave, she caught him watching Olaedo, who was reclining against a cushion, lazily picking at a bowl of ripe mangoes. Obiọra sighed and turned back to his food. A thought formed in Nwanyịocha's mind. He is beginning to see. Later that night, she approached her sister, who was braiding her hair before a bronze mirror. Olaedo, we need to talk. Olaedo smirked, not looking away from her reflection. About what, dear sister? You said you would manage the household, but all you do is command the servants, while I, your elder sister, work in my own home. Olaedo let out a light laugh. Oh, Nwanyịocha, do you not see? This is what life should be. A woman of class does not toil like a commoner. Nwanyịocha's hand tightened into fist. This is not right. Obiọra married you, yes? Olaedo interrupted, turning to face her. But who do you think he admires more? Who do you think he desires? Nwanyịocha's heart skipped a beat. Olaedo smiled knowingly. Men want beauty. They may marry hardworking women, but their hearts belong to those who dazzle them. She ran her fingers down her arm, admiring her own skin. You will see, sister. He will grow tired of your ways, and when he does, he will turn to me. Nwanyịocha's breath caught in her throat. Her sister was not just lazy. She was scheming, and for the first time, she realized a battle had begun. The days that followed were filled with silent battles. Olaedo continued to bask in luxury, spending her days adorning herself with coral beads, perfuming her skin with scented oils, and lounging under the shade of the palm trees. She was convinced that soon, Obiora's eyes would turn away from his wife and settle on her. But something unexpected was happening. Obiọra was noticing Nwanyịocha more and more. At first, it was subtle. A glance when she walked past, a lingering gaze as she bent over the fire, her hands expertly turning roasted yams. But soon, it became something more. He admired how she cared for his home, how she knew the right spices to bring out the flavor of his meals, how she listened intently to his words. Unlike Olaedo, who always seemed more interested in herself, Nwanyịocha saw him, truly saw him. One evening, as the golden sun melted into the horizon, Obiọra returned home from a long day at the market square. He was tired, his muscles aching from negotiations. As he entered his courtyard, he was greeted by a warm aroma, a pot of goat stew simmering over the fire. Nwanyịocha, with her wrapper tied around her waist, was adding the final touches to the meal. Obiọra stopped, watching her. Olaedo was nowhere in sight. Good evening, my husband, Nwanyịocha said, offering a smile. You cooked? Obiọra asked in surprise. She nodded. I know you like your meals fresh after a long day. A strange warmth filled Obiọra's chest. He stepped forward, inhaling the scent deeply. It smells wonderful. Nwanyịocha blushed slightly, but continued staring. Obiọra, instead of retiring to his chambers, sat beside her, watching as she walked. If you wish, I can serve you now, she offered. Obiọra hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. No, I will wait and eat with you. At that moment, something shifted between them. A bond was forming, one neither of them had intended, yet neither of them could deny. From the balcony, Olaedo watched everything, her fist clenched. This was not how things were supposed to be. She was the beauty, the one who deserved admiration. But there was Obiọra, sitting beside Nwanyịocha as if she were the only woman in the world. That night, as she lay on her luxurious bed, Olaedo made a decision. She had played patiently, waiting for Obiọra to come to her naturally, but it seemed that patience would not serve her. If he would not turn to her willingly, then she would make him. And so, with a smile as sharp as a warrior's blade, she began to plot. Olaedo was never one to accept defeat. If Obiọra would not come to her on his own, then she would make herself irresistible. The next morning, she drenched herself in the finest oils, her skin glistening like morning dew on fresh palm leaves. She wrapped herself in the softest silk, her curves accentuated by the delicate fabric. When she stepped out into the courtyard, even the servants stole glances. Her plan was simple. Obiọra would not be able to ignore her. That evening, Obiọra returned home, tired from a long day of trading. He expected to find the usual peace of his courtyard, perhaps the aroma of a fresh meal prepared by Nwanyịocha. Instead, he was met with the sound of drums. Curious, he stepped forward. There, under the light of flickering torches, stood Olaedo, dancing. Her body moved with the grace of the river goddess, her waist rolling like the waves of the great Niger River. The golden beads on her hips jingled in rhythm with the drums. Obiọra's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, there was no denying it. Olaedo smiled seductively, stepping closer, her voice low and smooth, like fresh palm wine. "My dear brother-in-law," she whispered, her eyes dark with mischief. "Do you not see me?" For a moment, Obiọra hesitated. Olaedo's beauty was undeniable, and any man would be tempted. But then, a soft voice called from the background. "My husband, I prepared your evening meal," Nwanyịocha said gently. At that moment, as he turned towards his wife, the spell was broken. He nodded at Olaedo politely, but walked away from her without a second glance. Olaedo was furious. For years, men had fallen at her feet with just a glance, and yet Obiọra was resisting her. She refused to accept it. That night, she wrapped herself in a sheer cloth and made her way towards Obiọra's chambers. The palace was quiet, the air thick with the scent of burning incense. Softly, she pushed open the door. Obiọra was seated by the fire, deep in thought. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "You work so hard, my dear Obiọra. A man of your status should be cared for." Obiọra turned, his expression unreadable. "Olaedo, what are you doing here?" She lowered herself to the floor, her fingers trailing along his hand. "Is it so wrong for me to worry about you?" For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Obiọra pulled his hand away. "You are my wife's sister," he said firmly. "You should leave." Olaedo's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She had never been rejected before. Without another word, she stormed out of the room, her heart pounding. Olaedo may have failed tonight, but she would not give up. "If I cannot have him willingly," she muttered, her eyes dark with frustration, "then I will make sure Nwanyịocha loses him." The game had changed. Olaedo no longer wanted just Obiọra's attention. She wanted Nwanyịocha to suffer. And with that thought, a wicked plan began to form in her mind. Olaedo lay awake deep into the night, her mind churning with thoughts of vengeance. She had tried charm, beauty, and seduction, but nothing had worked. Obiọra's heart was slipping further and further from her reach. Worse still, his admiration for Nwanyịocha was growing stronger. This could not be allowed. If she could not have him, then she would destroy everything her sister held dear. And so, a new plan was born, one that would not just bring Obiọra closer to her, but also turn him against Nwanyịocha. The next morning, Olaedo put on a sorrowful face, ensuring that the household servants would see her distress. She sighed, wiped imaginary tears, and whispered to the older women in the courtyard. "Ah, my heart is troubled," she lamented dramatically. "My sister has changed since coming here." One of the older women frowned. "Changed? How?" Olaedo hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. Then she sighed again. She does not love Obiọra the way a wife should. Olaedo paused, lowering her voice for effect. She speaks of another man. Gaps fill the courtyard. One of the younger women whispered, "What do you mean?" Olaedo shook her head, feigning reluctance. "I should not speak further. I only worry for my dear brother-in-law, who trusts her so deeply." The damage had been done. Within hours, the whispers began. Servants carried rumors through the household. "Did you hear? Nwanyịocha has another love. Poor Obiọra. He does not know he married a woman with a hidden heart." By the time the evening meal arrived, the entire household buzzed with suspicion. A week later, as part of her next move, Olaedo stole one of Obiọra's gold bracelets, a gift from his father, one of his most treasured possessions. She did not keep it. Instead, she carefully slipped it into Nwanyịocha's jewelry box, hiding it beneath her coral beads. Then she waited. That evening, as Obiọra prepared for a feast in the village square, he noticed the missing bracelet, his forehead creased with worry. "It was here just yesterday," he muttered, searching his chamber. Olaedo, standing nearby, pretended to look concerned. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Perhaps it was misplaced?" Obiọra frowned. He was certain he had left it in his chamber. Olaedo hesitated, then bit her lip, as if struggling with something. "Brother-in-law, I do not wish to cause trouble, but I saw Nwanyịocha holding a golden bracelet 2 nights ago." Obiọra froze. "You're sure?" Olaedo nodded slowly. A deep frown settled on Obiọra's face. Nwanyịocha was not a thief, but why would she take his bracelet without telling him? Deciding to uncover the truth for himself, he made his way to his wife's chamber. Nwanyịocha was plaiting her hair when he entered. "Good evening, my husband," she greeted with a warm smile. Obiọra did not return the smile. "Nwanyịocha," he said carefully, "have you seen my father's gold bracelet?" Nwanyịocha blinked in surprise. "No, I have not. Why do you ask?" Obiọra studied her closely. Then, without a word, he stepped to her wooden jewelry box and opened it. There, beneath the coral beads, lay the missing bracelet. Nwanyịocha's breath caught in her throat. I do not know how that got there." Obiọra's jaw tightened. Olaedo, who had followed quietly behind, let out a soft dramatic gasp. "Oh, sister, why did you not tell him if you took it by mistake?" "I did not take it," Nwanyịocha said firmly, looking between Obiọra and Olaedo. But doubt was already creeping into Obiọra's mind. Could it be true? Could his beloved wife have lied to him? Nwanyịocha's heart pounded as she realized Olaedo was playing a dangerous game, and if she did not find a way to stop her, she might lose everything. Nwanyịocha sat in stunned silence, her fingers trembling as she stared at the golden bracelet lying among her coral beads. She had never stolen anything in her life, yet the look in Obiọra's eyes was not one of immediate trust. It was doubt. Olaedo had succeeded in planting suspicion, but Nwanyịocha knew one thing: she could not allow this lie to stand. "My husband," she said softly, standing up, "I swear on my ancestors, I did not take this bracelet." Obiọra hesitated. He had known Nwanyịocha to be honest, gentle, and full of integrity. But the bracelet was found in her room. Could she truly be innocent? Olaedo let out a dramatic sigh. "Sister, why not just admit it? If you desire the bracelet, you could have asked. There's no shame in that." Nwanyịocha whirled to face her sister, her usually calm expression dark with anger. "Olaedo, I see what you're doing. You placed this here, didn't you?" Olaedo gasped, clutching her chest as though wounded. "Me? How could you accuse me of such wickedness?" Obiọra watched the exchange, his eyes darting between the two women. He did not know whom to believe. But before he could speak, a knock came at the door. One of the elderly servants stepped in hesitantly, bowing low. "Forgive me, my lord, but I could not help overhearing. If I may, I saw something earlier today." Olaedo stiffened. Obiọra turned sharply. "What did you see?" The old woman hesitated, glancing nervously at Olaedo, then at Nwanyịocha. I saw Lady Olaedo leaving the east wing earlier today, the same direction as Lady Nwanyịocha's chamber. She seemed to be hiding something in her hands. A heavy silence fell upon the room. Olaedo's face paled. Obiọra's gaze darkened as he turned to her. Olaedo, is this true? Olaedo's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she had miscalculated. The old woman was not supposed to see her. Well, Obiọra's voice was sharp. Olaedo's mind raced. If she denied it outright, Obiọra might dismiss the matter, but suspicion would remain. So instead, she began to weep. Forgive me, she cried, falling to her knees. I did not mean harm. I only wanted to test my sister's love for you, to see if she valued your things as she should. I praised the bracelet there, only to see if she would return it. I had no idea it would cause such trouble. Obiọra's jaw tightened. Nwanyịocha clenched her fist, rage bubbling in her chest. You are a liar, Olaedo, she hissed. You have tried to turn my husband against me. Olaedo continued her act, shaking her head. No, I swear, I meant no harm. I only wanted to test her. Obiọra sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. A foolish test, he muttered, his disappointment evident. You should not have done this, Olaedo. Olaedo bowed her head, pretending to sob, but in her heart, she smiled. Obiọra had not punished her. He had not cast her out. He had only scolded her. This meant that she still had a chance. Later that night, as Nwanyịocha lay beside Obiọra, she could feel his thoughts drifting into the darkness. He had defended her against Olaedo's lies, but something had changed. He had seen a side of Olaedo today, a woman desperate for his attention, and somewhere in his heart, Nwanyịocha feared that curiosity had been planted. Meanwhile, across the courtyard, Olaedo was already plotting her next move. She had been caught this time, but next time, she would be smarter, she would be ruthless, and Nwanyịocha would not see her next strike coming. Olaedo had been humiliated, but she was far from defeated. She realized something crucial that night. Obiọra had not been angry enough. He had scolded her, yes, but had he truly punished her? No. This meant that deep inside him, there was a part of him that was beginning to entertain thoughts of her. Olaedo just needed to push him further. If lies could not separate Obiọra and Nwanyịocha, then she would use desire. For 3 nights, Olaedo observed. She noticed how Obiọra and Nwanyịocha sat close together, but something was different. Obiọra's mind was troubled. She had planted doubt in his heart, and it was growing. On the 4th night, she made her move, dressing herself in a sheer wrapper, her skin glistening with scented oils. Olaedo walked barefoot through the corridors towards Obiọra's chambers. The night was silent, save for the distant sounds of crickets. She pushed open the wooden door, stepping inside. Obiọra sat near the fire, deep in thought, his strong arms resting on his knees. He looked up sharply as he saw her. Olaedo, he said, his voice edged with warning. Why are you here? She lowered her eyes, playing the part of the sorrowful, misunderstood woman. My lord, she whispered, I have wronged you, and I cannot sleep knowing you are upset with me. Obiọra's jaw tightened. That is in the past. Return to your chamber. But Olaedo did not move. Instead, she stepped closer, her fingers lightly grazing his hand. I only wish to serve you, she murmured, in any way you desire. Obiọra inhaled sharply. Her scent was intoxicating, a mix of fresh jasmine and rare oils. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly look at her. Olaedo was undeniably beautiful. In the flickering firelight, her skin seemed to glow like polished bronze. His pulse quickened, but just as his thoughts began to waver, a familiar voice called from outside. My husband! Obiọra stiffened. Olaedo froze in place, her heart pounding. Nwanyịocha was outside the chamber. She could not be caught here, not yet. Before Obiọra could react, she turned swiftly and disappeared through the side entrance, her breath uneven. She had come dangerously close, but she had also seen something in Obiọra's eyes. something that told her that he was beginning to see her as a woman, not just his wife's sister. This was only the beginning. Obiọra took a moment to compose himself before responding. "I am here," he said, stepping outside. Nwanyịocha studied him carefully. "You took long to answer," she said softly. Obiọra avoided her gaze. I was deep in thought. A chill ran Nwanyịocha's body. Something felt wrong. Her husband was acting strangely, and deep in her heart, she knew Olaedo was at the center of it. That night, Nwanyịocha lay awake, her mind racing. She could feel it. Her marriage was under attack, and if she did not act soon, she might lose everything. Nwanyịocha was no fool. She could see the subtle changes in her husband, the hesitation in his voice, the way his eyes darted away when she questioned him, the unspoken tension in the air, and she knew Olaedo was behind it. At dawn, as the household bustled with morning chores, Nwanyịocha sought out her sister. She found her in the courtyard, brushing her long hair, her golden bracelets jingling softly as she moved. Olaedo looked up as Nwanyịocha approached. She did not flinch, did not even try to act innocent. Instead, she smiled. "Sister," she greeted sweetly. "You look troubled. Did you not sleep well?" Nwanyịocha clenched her jaw. "Olaedo, I will not waste words. I know what you're doing." Olaedo tilted her head, feigning confusion. "And what, dear sister, do you think I'm doing?" "You're trying to destroy my marriage." Olaedo laughed softly. "Destroy? No, Nwanyịocha. I am only revealing the truth." Nwanyịocha stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Whatever game you're playing, stop it now. Obiọra is my husband. You will never have him." Olaedo met her gaze fearlessly. "Are you sure about that?" The words sent cold shiver down Nwanyịocha's spine. Olaedo was confident, too confident, and that meant that she had already made progress. Meanwhile, Obiọra found himself distracted all day. He had thought about the previous night far too much, about Olaedo's scent, the warmth of her skin so close to his. He was ashamed. Nwanyịocha was his wife. She had been nothing but loyal to him. And yet, Obiọra could not deny that something was pulling him towards Olaedo. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of orange and crimson, Olaedo made her next move. She found Obiọra alone in the garden, pretending to be lost in sorrow. "My lord," she whispered, her voice laced with pain. "May I speak?" Obiọra sighed. "Olaedo, you must stop this. I am leaving," she interrupted. He turned to her sharply. "Leaving?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "It is clear that my presence causes trouble between you and my sister. I will return to my father's house." Obiọra hesitated. He should have encouraged her to go. That would be the right thing to do. But instead, he heard himself say, "There is no need for that." Olaedo hid her smile. Her trap was working. As the days passed, Olaedo's presence in the household remained strong. She no longer needed to force herself into Obiọra's path. He now sought her out on his own. Nwanyịocha saw it happening before her eyes. The way Obiọra's gaze lingered on Olaedo longer than it should. The way he found excuses to be near her. Her stomach twisted in knots. Her marriage was slipping through her fingers, and she had to act fast. But what could she do when the man she loved was already falling for her own sister? Nwanyịocha had always believed that love alone could protect her marriage. But now, she realized love was not enough. She had to fight. That night, as Obiọra lay beside her, distant and silent, Nwanyịocha made up her mind. She would confront him directly. "Obiọra," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. He grunted in response, his back still turned to her. "Do you love me?" Obiọra tensed. The question was unexpected. "Why would you ask me that?" he muttered. "Because you no longer look at me the way you used to," she said. "Because I see the way your eyes follow my sister." Obiọra turned sharply. "Nwanyịocha, don't deny it," she snapped, sitting up. "I am not a fool, Obiọra. You are slipping away from me, and I need to know. Is this marriage still worth fighting for?" Obiọra sat in silence. For the first time, he did not have an immediate answer, and that terrified her. Meanwhile, Olaedo had been waiting. She knew her sister was growing desperate, and desperation often led to mistakes. All she needed was one last push to break Nwanyịocha completely. So she devised a dangerous plan, one that would leave Obiọra with no choice but to take her as his wife. The next evening, Olaedo prepared a special meal for Obiọra. She ensured that Nwanyịocha was nowhere near the kitchen as she stirred the ingredients, adding a few drops of a special potion, one given to her by an old herbalist from a distant land. Not a poison, not a spell, but something that will cloud his judgment, lower his resistance, and make him weak to his desires. By the time Obiọra finished his meal, his mind was hazy, his body warm with strange longing. Olaedo appeared before him, draped in the finest silk, her scent intoxicating. She knelt before him, her eyes filled with faint sorrow. "My lord, I have fought my love for you for too long," she whispered. "I cannot fight it anymore." Obiọra should have pushed her away, but the warmth coursing through his body made it impossible to think straight. Olaedo leaned in, and this time, he did not resist. The next morning, the entire household was buzzing with whispers. Nwanyịocha heard it before she saw it. Her husband had spent the night in Olaedo's chamber. Her palms trembled as she stepped out, the servants quickly lowering their gazes to avoid her eyes. She forced herself to walk forward, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. And there, in the morning light, stood Obiọra and Olaedo together. Olaedo's wrapper was loosely tied, her hair slightly disheveled, clear signs of what had happened. And Obiọra, her husband, did not look at her with shame. Instead, he looked at her with guilt and finality. It was over. Olaedo had won. By the time Nwanyịocha found her voice, it was already too late. Obiọra turned to the elders that had been called to settle the matter. With a steady voice, he declared, "I will take Olaedo as my second wife." Nwanyịocha's world shattered. She opened her mouth to protest, but the elders nodded. It was allowed. A man of Obiọra's status could take another wife if he wished, and he had chosen her own sister. Olaedo lowered her eyes in false humility, but behind the veil of submission, her lips curled into a victorious smile. She had taken everything from Nwanyịocha, and there was nothing she could do about it, or so she thought. Nwanyịocha stood frozen, her world crashing around her. Her own husband had chosen her sister. The elders had spoken. The decision was final. The murmurs of the villagers surrounded her like a suffocating cloud, their whispers slicing through her heart like a blade. She has lost him. What a shame. But was it not her fault for letting her sister be so close? Nwanyịocha could not breathe. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, her hands gripping the earth as if she could stop the world from spinning. But the world did not stop. Instead, it moved forward without her. For days, Nwanyịocha locked herself in her chambers, refusing to eat, refusing to speak, until an old woman knocked on her door. It was Mamifi, the eldest woman in the village, a woman said to possess wisdom far beyond her years. "Nwanyịocha," she said in a voice as deep as the forest, "you weep as though you have lost everything, but a woman who still has breath in her lungs has not lost." Nwanyịocha looked up, her eyes dull with sorrow. "What do you mean, Mamifi?" she asked hoarsely. The old woman smiled. "A river does not rage unless something has disturbed its flow. If your husband was truly happy, why do the spirits tell me his heart is restless?" Nwanyịocha's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? Could there still be a chance to win him back? Meanwhile, in the main house, Olaedo had finally gotten everything she ever wanted. Or so she thought. She had won Obiọra. She had taken her sister's place. And yet, something was wrong. Obiọra no longer looked at her with the same hunger as he did that fateful night. He was distant, distracted. Every time they lay together, she felt his hesitation. Every time he touched her, his hands felt cold. She had expected to be treated like a queen, but instead, she felt like a shadow in her own home. And worse, she could feel Nwanyịocha's presence even in her absence. The villagers still whispered her name. The servants still spoke of her kindness. And Obiọra still loved her. That night, as rain poured heavily over the village, Olaedo lay awake. Her victory did not feel as sweet anymore. And deep in her heart, fear began to creep in. She had won the battle, but what if she had not won the war? The night was restless. The rain pounded against the thatched roof. The wind howled through the trees. And somewhere in the depths of the village, a woman wept. But it was not Nwanyịocha. It was Olaedo. For the first time since she had taken her sister's place, she felt the weight of her choices. Obiọra had been distant all week. She had expected him to shower her with love, gifts, attention, but instead, he seemed burdened. When she reached for him at night, he turned away. When she spoke, his replies were short, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw regret. Regret? Olaedo refused to accept it. I have fought too hard for this. She was the wife now. She would make sure he forgot about Nwanyịocha forever. But how? Meanwhile, Nwanyịocha sat in Mami Fi's hut, listening to the old woman as she ground herbs in her wooden bowl. You were foolish, my child, Mami Fi murmured. You let your sister into your home and expected her not to steal your gold. Nwanyịocha bowed her head. I did not think she would betray me. Mami Fi chuckled. A snake does not change its nature, even if you feed it from your own hands. Nwanyịocha's finger curled into fist. Then tell me, Mami Fi, how do I get back what is mine? The old woman looked at her sharply. You do not get back what was freely given away, but you can make a man remember what he has lost. Nwanyịocha leaned forward, hope flickering in her chest. How? Mami Fi placed a hand on her forehead, closing her eyes. For a moment, there was only silence. Then she whispered, let him see you rise from the ashes. The next morning, Nwanyịocha did something she had never done before. She stepped out of her grief. She bathed in scented oils. She dressed in fine wrappers. She adorned herself with golden beads and cowrie shells. And then she did the unthinkable. She walked through the village, her head held high, ignoring the whispers of those who pitied her. She greeted the market women. She laughed with the children. She even smiled at the elders. She refused to be the scorned wife. And when Obiọra saw her radiance, something inside him stirred. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time. That evening, Obiọra sat alone, staring at the flickering flames of a lantern. Nwanyịocha had been glowing today. She had looked like the woman he had fallen in love with. Strong, proud, untouchable. His chest tightened. Had he made a mistake? Had he given up a rare jewel for something fleeting? The thought refused to leave him, and when Olaedo approached him that night, dressed in her finest, her eyes filled with longing, Obiọra could not bring himself to touch her, because in his mind, all he saw was Nwanyịocha. Olaedo felt it, the change, the shift, the way Obiọra was slipping through her fingers. She had taken him from Nwanyịocha, but now she feared she would lose him to her all over again, and that she could not allow. The walls of the compound felt like they were closing in on Olaedo. She had won Obiọra, yet she could feel him slipping away. She had taken everything from Nwanyịocha, yet her sister was flourishing instead of crumbling. No, she whispered to herself, I will not let this happen. Olaedo made a bold move. She called a meeting with the village elders, a rare and daring act for a woman. She claimed she had been disrespected in her own home. As the elders sat in the large obi, listening to her complaints, she spoke with a trembling voice, ensuring she sounded both pitiful and desperate. My husband does not see me, she lamented. Instead, he longs for a woman who has failed in her duties as a wife. The elders murmured amongst themselves. One of the oldest men, Nwanyịocha, cleared his throat. A man's heart followed the path that calls to it, child, he said. If your husband looks elsewhere, perhaps you should ask yourself why. Olaedo gritted her teeth. That was not what she wanted to hear. She needed them to force Obiọra's hand. My lords, she pressed on, her voice turning sharp. If my husband refuses to give me my rightful place, then let it be known that I will no longer serve as his wife. A gasp spread through the room. A wife could not leave her husband without strong justification. If she did, she would carry shame upon herself and her family. Olaedo's father, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "You have caused enough trouble," he growled. "You forced your way into this marriage, and now you complain?" Olaedo's blood ran cold. Her own father had turned against her. Meanwhile, Obiọra sat alone by the riverbank, his thoughts clouded with confusion. His hands reached for the cool water, his reflection staring back at him, and in that reflection, he saw a man who had made a grave mistake. Olaedo had come into his life like a raging fire, consuming everything in her path. But Nwanyịocha, she was the steady river, the calm that had always guided him, the woman who had once been his world. And now he feared it was too late to reclaim what he had lost. As he rose to leave, he saw an old man watching him from under a large iroko tree. "Your spirit is troubled, son of the great warrior," the old man said. Obiọra stiffened. "And who are you to know this?" The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling. "I am but a man who listens to the whispers of the wind," he replied. "And the wind tells me that your heart beats for a woman who is no longer yours." Obiọra exhaled sharply. "Then tell me, wise one, what must I do to win her back?" The old man chuckled. "Only a fool thinks he can win a river's favor after polluting its waters," he said. "You cannot take back what is lost, but you can prove that you are worthy once more." Obiọra felt a spark of hope in his chest. It was not too late, but he would have to fight, and fight he would. That evening, Olaedo stormed into her chambers, her heart racing with fury. Her plan with the elders had failed. Her father had humiliated her. And worst of all, she saw the way Obiọra had looked at Nwanyịocha today. There was longing in his eyes. Regret. No, I will not lose him. Olaedo knew that if she did not act now, her victory would crumble. So, she did something unthinkable. She sought out a dibia, the village medicine man, and she asked for a charm that would make Obiọra forget Nwanyịocha forever. The dibia stared at her with dark knowing eyes. "You play a dangerous game, daughter of the earth," he said. Olaedo did not care. She was willing to risk everything because she had come too far to lose now. The dibia's hut smelled of crushed herbs, burning incense, and something darker, something forbidding. Olaedo sat before the medicine man, her heart pounding, as he ground black seeds into a thick paste. "You seek to bend a man's will," the dibia murmured, not looking at her. "To take what does not belong to you." Olaedo swallowed hard. "Obiọra is already mine. I only wish to keep what is mine." The old man chuckled, shaking his head. "If he were truly yours, you will not be here." Olaedo's fingers dug into her lap. She had come too far to turn back now. "Tell me what to do," she demanded. The dibia sighed, then reached for a small carved calabash. He poured a dark liquid into it and placed it before her. 3 drops of this," he instructed, "in his palm wine. If he drinks, his heart will forget any woman but you." Olaedo's lips parted slightly. It seemed too easy. "But beware," the dibia warned, his voice turning grave. "The spirits do not grant such favor without cost. A heart bound by force is a heart that will never truly be at peace." Olaedo did not care for his warnings. What is peace if I lose everything? She took the calabash, thanked him, and left before doubt could take root. While Olaedo plotted, Obiọra prepared for battle, not with weapons, but with actions. If he had any hope of winning back Nwanyịocha's heart, he had to become the man she once admired. That morning, he did something he had never done before. He went to the market himself. He bought the freshest yams, the ripest plantains, and the juiciest pineapples, things he once left for Nwanyịocha to handle. The villagers watched in astonishment. A wealthy man doing a woman's work? Perhaps his new wife does not care for his meals as much as the first one did. Or perhaps he regrets. The whispers followed him, but Obiọra did not care. He was on a mission. When he returned home, he took another bold step. He entered the kitchen. The servant gasped as he rolled up his sleeves and lit the fire himself. He pounded yam. He roasted fish. He He prepared a feast, just as Nwanyịocha once did for him. And when he was done, he sent for her. When Nwanyịocha entered the dining hut, she froze. There, sitting before her, was a spread of her favorite meals. Steam rose from the bowls. The scent of grilled tilapia and pepper soup filled the air, and at the center of it all was Obiọra. He stood, his face unreadable. "I made this for you," he said. Silence fell between them. Nwanyịocha searched his face, looking for mockery, for tricks, but all she saw was genuine effort. Her heart twisted, but she did not let it show. She sat down, picked up a piece of yam, and took a slow, deliberate bite. It was delicious. Obiọra watched her, his expression hopeful, but she did not smile. Instead, she rose to her feet and said, "So now you remember what it means to care. Good. I hope you do not forget again." Then, without another word, she walked away. Obiọra exhaled deeply. It was not forgiveness, but it was a start. That night, Olaedo set her plan into motion. She summoned Obiọra to her chambers, pouring him a cup of fresh palm wine. She stirred in the 3 drops of the dibia's charm, watching the liquid swirl in the dim light. "Drink, my love," she whispered, pressing the cup into his hands. Obiọra hesitated. Something in her eyes made his stomach churn, but he did not want to fight. So, he lifted the cup to his lips, and just as the first drop touched his tongue, the door burst open. Olaedo and Obiọra turned sharply to see Mamifi standing at the threshold, her eyes burning with eerie light. Her voice boomed like thunder. "Spit it out, Obiọra." Startled, Obiọra spat the wine onto the floor. The liquid sizzled. A dark mist rose from the ground, hissing like a snake. Olaedo gasped, stumbling back in horror. Mamifi stepped forward, her aged face filled with fury. "You dare call upon a dark force to bind a man's heart?" she hissed at Olaedo. "You have invited destruction into your home." Obiọra's eyes widened in realization. "She tried to bewitch me." Olaedo fell to her knees, trembling. I only wanted to." Mamifi raised her hand. "The spirit will not take this lightly. A price must be paid." And as she spoke, a sudden gust of wind blew through the hut, sending the flames flickering wildly. The gods had spoken, and Olaedo's fate was sealed. Olaedo knelt trembling in the center of the gathering hall. Her once proud shoulders slumped in disgrace. The elders of the village had been summoned, and the entire community had gathered outside, whispering in hushed voices. It was not every day that a wife was accused of using forbidden charms on her husband. Obiọra stood to the side, his face stone cold, while Nwanyịocha watched from the shadows, arms crossed. The chief elder, Nwanyịocha, cleared his throat. His voice was heavy with judgment. "Olaedo, daughter of Ikenna, you have been accused of seeking dark magic to bind your husband's heart," he declared. "Do you deny this charge?" Olaedo looked up, her eyes wild. She could feel the weight of the entire village scorn pressing down on her. "I only wanted to keep my husband," she cried. "Is that a crime?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the elders. One of them, an old woman named Mamuju, shook her head. "Foolish girl," she spat. "If a man must be tied to you with charm, then he was never yours to begin with." Olaedo bit her lip, rage boiling within her. "She stole him from me," she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Nwanyịocha. "She pretends to be innocent, but she's the reason he no longer loves me." A stunned silence fell over the hall. Nwanyịocha stepped forward, her voice steady and calm. "I did not steal what was already mine," she said simply. Her words were like a dagger to Olaedo's heart. Obiọra lowered his head, shame tightening his chest. For the first time, he saw the truth clearly. Obiọra took a deep breath and stepped forward. "The fault is mine," he admitted. "I was blinded by beauty and forgot the value of the woman who truly cared for me." The crowd gasped. Olaedo's breath hitched. Even now, he refused to defend her. The chief elder raised a hand for silence. "The spirits have already given their warning," he said. "Olaedo, you have insulted the gods with your action. You will not go unpunished." A hush fell over the gathering. The punishment for using dark charms varied. Sometimes a public flogging, sometimes banishment. Olaedo's heart pounded. Would they send her away? Will she lose everything? After a long pause, the chief elder finally spoke. You shall remain in this village, but you will live in humility, he decreed. For 1 year, you will serve the women of the village, cooking, cleaning, and fetching water for those in need. Olaedo's jaw dropped. Like a common slave, she burst out. Mami Fi, the village seer, stepped forward, her voice like rolling thunder. A woman who refuses to do work of a wife must now do the work of the people, she said. Only then will your heart learn its lesson. The crowd nodded in agreement. Olaedo felt humiliated beyond words, but she could not refuse. If she did, the next punishment would be exile. Tears burned in her eyes as she bowed her head in defeat. As the gathering ended, Obiọra approached Nwanyịocha. His heart was heavy. His words felt insufficient. Will you ever forgive me? He asked softly. Nwanyịocha looked at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. Forgiveness is not given, she said. It is earned. She turned and walked away, leaving Obiọra standing alone in his regrets. But deep inside, something stirred in Nwanyịocha's heart. A spark, a question. Is it truly over, or is it just the beginning? The morning sun had barely risen when Olaedo was roused from her sleep by a sharp knock on her door. She groaned, turning over the hard wooden mat she had been forced to sleep on since her punishment was declared. Wake up, lazy girl, a sharp voice rang out. Olaedo sat up with a start. It was Mami Nkiru, one of the village's most respected women, known for her no-nonsense nature. You think fetching water for the women of this village will be easy? Mami Nkiru scoffed. Get up before I pour this cold water on your head. Olaedo bit her lip to keep from snapping back. This was her new reality, serving the very women she once looked down upon. She dragged herself to her feet, wrapped a cloth around her waist, and followed Mami Nkiru into the village square. Olaedo was given a large clay pot and instructed to fetch water from the stream outside the village. She had never carried anything heavier than her golden jewelry, and now she was expected to balance a full pot of water on her head. The other women laughed as she struggled to lift the pot. Where is all that pride now, beautiful one? One of them taunted. Olaedo ground her teeth and forced herself to stay silent. She staggered under the weight as she walked towards the stream. Every step was agony, her feet sinking into the dirt path. By the time she returned, sweat dripped down her face, and her back ached. But there was no time to rest. Next came sweeping the marketplace, pounding yam, and helping prepare meals for the elders. Olaedo had never worked this hard in her life. And worse, no one pitied her. For the first time, she realized the weight of true labor, the very work she had forced her sister to do alone. Meanwhile, Obiọra could not find peace. Everywhere he turned, he was reminded of Nwanyịocha, of her kindness, her patience, her love. He had spent so long chasing beauty that he had overlooked devotion. Determined to prove himself, he sought out Mami Fi, the wise seer. What must I do to earn her forgiveness? He asked. Mami Fi studied him for a long time. To earn her heart again, she said, you must not only seek forgiveness, you must prove you are worthy of love. Obiọra nodded. He had lost Nwanyịocha once. He would not lose her again. As the days turned into weeks, Olaedo began to change. She no longer slapped at the woman of the village. She no longer turned up her nose at hard work. And slowly, she began to realize something painful. Nwanyịocha was not the enemy. I was. Her pride had blinded her. Her selfishness had ruined her marriage. And now, she had nothing left. One evening, as she sat alone by the cooking fire, she saw a familiar figure approach. It was Nwanyịocha. Olaedo's chest tightened. She had no right to expect kindness from the sister she had wronged. Yet, Nwanyịocha handed her a bowl of food without a word. Olaedo took it, her fingers trembling. Why? She whispered. Nwanyịocha sighed. Because I remember the sister you used to be, she said, before you lost yourself to greed. Tears filled Olaedo's eyes. For the first time in her life, she whispered, I am sorry. With only 3 weeks left in her punishment, the village elders gathered once more. It was time to determine if Olaedo had truly learned her lesson. Nwanyịocha, the elder chief, turned to her. Olaedo, have you learned the value of humility? Olaedo nodded. Yes, my lord, she said. I was blind, but now I see. Mamifi stepped forward. The spirits have watched you, she said, and they say you have been changed. A murmur spread through the villagers. Olaedo could barely believe it. She was finally free. Though Olaedo had learned the hard way about humility, a bitter truth still burned in her heart. She had lost everything. She had walked, she had suffered, she had even humbled herself before Nwanyịocha. Yet, despite it all, her sister had won. Obiọra had once been her husband. Why should I be the one to suffer while she walks away with my life? The thought consumed her. One evening, as she fetched firewood from the forest, a shadowed figure stepped into her path. It was Agadi Nwanyị, the old woman rumored to be the keeper of an ancient and dangerous charm. You walk with the weight of sorrow, the crone rasped. Olaedo's fist clenched. I have lost everything, she whispered. Agadi Nwanyị's toothless grin sent shiver down her spine. Lost? The old woman chuckled. Or simply too weak to take back what is yours? Olaedo's breath hitched. You would help me? She asked cautiously. Agadi Nwanyị nodded. Love is like fire, she said. If you wish to reclaim it, you must be willing to burn. Olaedo hesitated for a moment, but her anger was stronger than her fear. I will do whatever it takes. The old woman handed her a small black vial. Give this to him, she whispered. When he drinks, his heart will belong to you alone, forever. Olaedo clutched the vial tightly. She would not fail this time. The next evening, a feast was held to celebrate the coming of the dry season. Olaedo moved carefully through the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She carried a wooden cup filled with palm wine, laced with a potion. She found Obiọra laughing with Nwanyịocha near the fire. The sight filled her with rage. Swallowing her hatred, she smiled and approached them. My sister, she said sweetly, as a sign of my acceptance, allow me to serve your husband a drink. Obiọra hesitated, but Nwanyịocha, always seeing the best in people, nodded. Olaedo handed the cup to Obiọra. He raised it to his lips, but before he could drink, a powerful gust of wind blew through the village, and the flames from the fire rose high into the sky. A loud cawing filled the air as a black raven swooped down, knocking the cup from his hands. The villagers gasped. Olaedo's eyes widened in horror as the cup spilled onto her own hands. The potion soaked into her skin like fire. A sudden piercing pain shot through her veins. Her body stiffened. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her limbs twisted unnaturally, her skin turning ashen as her eyes rolled backward. She collapsed to the ground, convulsing violently. The villagers rushed forward, but it was too late. Within moments, Olaedo lay lifeless. A hush fell over the crowd. Mamifi stepped forward, staring at the fallen woman with sad eyes. The spirits have spoken, she murmured. A heart filled with darkness will always consume itself. Nwanyịocha's eyes filled with tears. Despite everything, she had loved her sister once. Obiọra wrapped an arm around her. She chose this path, he whispered. The raven circled above them once before disappearing into the night. The next morning, Olaedo was buried outside the village, in a place where the wind never stopped howling. It was said that her spirit wandered restlessly, forever searching for what she had lost. Nwanyịocha mourned her sister, but she did not look back. She had fought for her happiness. She had suffered and endured. Now she would embrace the future without fear. Obiọra stood beside her, humbled by all he had learned. Let us live, he said softly, and never repeat the mistakes of the past. She took his hand, and together they stepped into the golden sunrise, leaving behind the shadows of a story that would be told for generations. A story of pride and consequence, of love and betrayal, and of a woman who tried to claim a heart but lost her own in the process. The end.